Hey everyone, Jeff here, and welcome to Bourbon Over Baseball. We've actually got an interesting podcast today, something a little different, something I want to start doing a little bit more of. We're actually going to do an interview today, so we're really psyched to have Matt Gula from the Showdown Bot here, which if anybody in the Showdown fandom world probably knows Matt and probably knows Showdown Bot just because it is in the simplest terms, incredibly badass. And so I'm really psyched to bring him on and have us talk a little bit about it here. So first off, hey Matt, what's up, man?
Hey Jeff, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Big fan of what you guys do, so pretty pumped to be on the podcast.
Heck yeah, dude. Yeah, it seemed like truthfully, it just seemed like an absolute no-brainer. I've been wanting to do just some different types of things for the pod. And yeah, man, bringing you on is just was an absolute no-brainer. So I guess like first, like I said, most people probably listening to this know what it is. I
Mhm.
guess from, someone who knows Showdown, maybe doesn't know Showdown Bot. Do you want to just give a quick, like, basically just what is Showdown Bot, right? Like, tell us it in your words.
Yeah, so basically, a few years ago, and I'll probably go over more of like the how I came across it story and like how I actually came about building it. But basically, what it is it's this website, showdownbot.com, and the purpose of it is just to automate the process of building custom cards, right? So in the past, like a lot of people have built great stuff with custom cards, including you guys on the blog. Um, but what I wanted to do is sort of like make it really accessible to a bunch of people. So luckily, I have some decent Photoshop skills, and I'm a data engineer professionally. So basically, I concocted this website that you just enter a name and a year for anybody. So for example, you could put I don't know, Barry Bonds 2001. I know that's the most created card. But you could even go back in time. You could go, Reggie Jackson from the 70s. You can do, Mickey Mantle from the 50s. So you can just pick basically any player and any year, and then click. You can optionally put an image on there if you want to, and then you just click generate, and it does all the heavy lifting for you. So it'll crunch the stats. It'll try and convert basically their real life stats into like showdown stats,
Right.
and then it'll actually create the image for you, and then give you that image, so you can do whatever you want with the image. Just look at it, download it, save it, whatever you want to do.
Right. And I mean, speaking as someone who's used it often, and I think that kind of says a lot. Like, I've never been the one to be making cards as part of this crew, but, Bob does, Matt does, Peter does, this whole crew. And all of us collectively are making cards through the bot often, which I think says a lot because, like, we're quote unquote card creators, but using the bot to make cards just because it's a freaking blast, right?
Mhm.
I've pretty much made, I think, the 1948 Indians team, for myself,
Mm,
just because, and then throwing in some 19 teens and 20s players just for fun, which is, again, that's like part of like the world that opened it up to. Because like, and again, I know we'll talk about this more later, but like, I always felt strongly, like I've always felt strongly that Showdown is about inclusivity and just like everybody can
mhm,
do anything. And like I think that with creating cards, there's definitely this barrier
mhm.
from the designs, how they look, and then also having a formula, which so many people are very, very just they don't want to give up their formulas because they've worked hard on them. And what the bot did is just like with one fell swift, like it just made everybody a card creator, and you didn't have to be great at Photoshop and you didn't have to be the perfect formula guy. You could just make a card and go. And I think from a playing perspective, like just picking up a card and going and playing is like the point of what we're doing here. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think like I've talked to Peter about this a little bit. We've messaged a little bit about this, but like I totally agree. And one thing I did, and this is like a term that's in like the programming world, but open sourcing it. So if anybody wants to see the logic that makes the bot work, it's online and it's accessible, right? So there's nothing hidden about the formulas. There's no like secrets that stay with me. If you really were good at programming and you wanted to tweak it to your own liking, that's totally possible. And you can, run that locally on your machine. So I wanted to make it as like open and honest as possible, because I knew that, that transparency would help, and I feel like people appreciate that.
Yeah, big time. And I mean, I think it's created, again, just as a fan of it, and someone again who I'm sure you were, we were all very into Showdown, before the
Mhm.
pandemic. The pandemic definitely accelerated the fandom, which was so great, and it brought more people to it. And it almost felt like an exact moment. I remember last year when you released it. Um, Everybody's heads just exploded, just
Yeah.
collectively exploded within the fandom. And I don't know, like, I guess, like, did you expect that? Like, or did that just kind of like, oh my gosh, was not, I know that you were overwhelmed with the number of requests, which you probably know more about the specifics.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely day one. I released it, I think, November 30th, or like right after Thanksgiving, to the public, and it was on the first day. Like I basically I store, like, in order to track errors in the cards, I store like the everybody that's basically pressing. I store like what the card was, like
Hmm.
what you inputted as the name, all that stuff, so I can track how many cards are created through the bot. And I had a database that had like a cap of I think it was 20,000 rows. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna get to this in like, half a year. Nobody's gonna use this thing. And then by day three, I had to upgrade to a more premium version because we were already at 20,000 cards created, which was, I mean, it was pretty nuts. And it helped. Like I had, um, if you know, do you know Giraffe Neck Mark on YouTube?
No, I don't actually.
He's like, he makes baseball videos. I'd highly recommend. But he actually caught wind of my bot and made a tweet about it, and that I think helped gain some traction. People like, oh, I love Showdown, like, and
Oh,
started
wow.
using that as well. Yeah, the first day. Um, so yeah, it was definitely overwhelming at the beginning, uh, and it
I mean, I
was
guess that's a
definitely
good problem to
surprising.
have, right? I don't know.
Oh, totally.
Right. Because I remember, it's so funny. I remember the post you made. And again, this is for anybody, you might already be in it, but there's a Facebook group called Bring Back, I think it's Bring Back MLB Showdown.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of stuff going on, and they're selling and whatnot. But your post was just like probably the greatest post in that group without question the entire year. And I remember when you hit that threshold, you were kind of like, oh my gosh, everyone, like, calm down, chill. Like, I got to work on upgrading this, in like the nicest way possible, because you were being super cool about it. But yeah, it was like, I think everybody was like, oh yeah, we did probably, overload your system a bit.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was so nervous when that thing came out because I didn't think it would catch on super. Like, whenever, coming from like a development and programming background, like
Hmm.
my stuff, like you never know if it's going to break on somebody else's machine. And
Right.
honestly, there were a couple errors, uh, but they weren't like breaking errors. And I was just so thankful that it actually worked, to be honest, at the beginning.
Right.
I was just happy that, people, no matter what machine they used, it wasn't breaking and they could make cards. And that five, I maxed out there'd be like 5 users at a time, but it sometimes, I mean, it was, especially in that first day, it was like hundreds. So it was shocking that nothing broke, to be honest with you.
That's incredible. Well, I guess, like, I almost want to take a step like backwards in time, and I guess, like, I'd love to hear more just about, your background, like, I guess, like, your Showdown fandom, like, when it came back, like, just really
Mhm.
everything that kind of got you up to the point of, like, kind of vision, like having the vision for the bot and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a long story, but I'll try and be as concise as possible. But I mean, to start from the very beginning, as a kid, as sort of all of us baseball fans did, I collected cards. We had this. I grew up in Short Hills, New Jersey, which is 40 minutes outside of New York City, and we had this local card shop called One Flight Up. And I remember as like in 2000, so I actually wasn't, I know you guys are a big OG 2001, 2000 sets guys, but I actually got introduced to Showdown in 2003. And I feel like with everybody that played Showdown, like you remember some of your first cards really vividly. I
Oh,
don't know if that's
absolutely.
just me.
No,
But
it's 100% a thing. Like, even bad cards, like, you just, like,
oh,
remember playing with them often, Right.
Oh, those are the ones I remember. So I got a 2003 starter set. And the foils I got in there, I was a big Mets fan. And I'm pretty sure in that first starter, the foils I got were, I at least got a Piazza in there. And that was sort of when he was on the decline of his career, but that was my favorite player. And he was definitely in at least the first few. I know he was in a bunch of those sets. Like they had a set number of foils that they would include.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like weird cards. Like there was a Jeremy Burnitz on the Mets that he was, I mean, not good anymore. I mean, I think he had a decent card in the beginning sets, right? I
He did.
think,
Yeah, he had a foil in 2000. And it's funny,
yeah.
like my kind of similar, like there's so many players that I just were not on my radar. Maybe as just a little kid and like just a Cleveland fan that I
Hmm.
didn't even know much about Jeremy Burnitz. And then it's funny knowing I don't know as much about the 2002 and on, but like hearing
Hmm.
which teams they ended up making to. Like I'm becoming more of a baseball fan basically every day as I just do more and more research. But yeah, Burnitz had a great card. Funny to hear that he was eventually on the Mets because I didn't know that, and then he was not a great card, right?
Yeah, they signed him, I think in 2002, maybe the offseason then. And I mean, he wasn't what he was
Right.
like a couple of years earlier. But like I remember him, I think his name was Hideki Irabu, and
Yep.
he on the Rangers, and he had, I think, a one control, 16 outs, and he let up a homer, but he had to be on my roster just because, I mean, it was early in the game.
Right.
Uh, so
It's
there's like
really
weird
it's
cards like
funny to
that.
hear. It's funny to hear, like, even as a kid, kind of you having to use that control one. Cause like, I feel like most
Yeah.
of us as kids were just like throwing that card by the wayside and then be like, where's
Hmm.
Maddox? Like,
Yeah,
where's Cone?
exactly.
So
I know. And that was like, I mean, I remember because I don't know how you guys used to play, especially if like when I was younger, we didn't care about strategy cards. We didn't care about like point totals. I mean, we were just trying to make the most stacked teams, at least from my friend group that played. But then later on, and I'll get to this later, but now we've definitely fully embraced all of the advanced rules. But yeah,
right.
I mean, I just remember like getting those 2003 cards. I still have a little bit of a soft spot for them, especially after diving deeper into sort of the stats behind them. I have a little bit less of that nostalgia for them just because, and
Right.
we can get into this later too, but I mean, it's pretty objectively after going probably too far down analyzing these cards. I mean, 2000 and 2001 were just superior in terms of accuracy. Um,
And it's funny for on that note, and again, like fully admitting you're right. Like I'm a 2001 guy. That's what I grew up with. And I stopped after 2001, not because of how 2002 went. Maybe I don't really remember, but yeah, I just don't know really anything 2002 and beyond. And I think we've all come to the conclusion that 2000 had flaws
mhm.
and 2001 just fixed it. And like
Yeah.
it's basically like the perfect set in my opinion. And also emotionally, personally, however you want to put it. I'm just very tied to that set.
I mean, like, I think I agree with you. And the only unfortunate part was that I had to start in 2003 because I
Mhm.
sort of gotten in that mindset. And I don't know if other people feel this way too, but I sort of have to translate the cards like from 2002 through 2005. I have to translate them sort of to 2001 in my brain. It's like a weird thing where I can't like imagine if they're good or not almost, and I have to
Mhm.
sort of adjust it in my brain and normalize it. And I'm so used to, because all we played like was I mean, we could use, I think we didn't even have that much 2002, but we had, like my buddies and I had, I mean, a ton of '03 through '05 cards, but and we'd even try and mix in the '01s because one of my buddy's older brothers had a bunch of '01s, and that's objectively also the best design. I think it's pretty clear.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, we sort of had to like almost translate that to the 2002 type like on base numbers, um, which I think do have their positives. Like from a gameplay perspective, I do like having the hitters chart occur more often. Um, but at the same time, I mean, those first two sets were just objectively the best.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's really interesting to hear your perspective from like my gen. It felt like I think I'm a couple years older than you, which would make sense
Hmm.
because I was hitting it at 2000, 2001 solidly. I don't recall any experiences with O2. Maybe I was
Mhm.
already out by that point. But then like a couple years later, like you come in kind of probably the same age I was, about 2000, and said, well, this is the game
Yep.
we're playing, and now
Yep.
like, and I've probably self-admittedly been probably too stubborn about the 2002 through '05 cards. I'll readily admit that, just because I kind of wrote them off, said that's like not my style. And it's funny because we play, even our crew plays without the strategies, like strategy cards, like you said,
Mhm.
and we play in a way that like we do rules that almost extend home runs, almost like the 2002 and beyond
Mm.
cards. So it's like we almost naturally have gotten there, but just in a different way. But yeah, it's. I mean, you could talk to any individual person in the Showdown world about their favorite set, and it's like it's like an East Side West Side thing in any given city. Like it's very specifically drawn lines between which one you like. But it is good. Like, I mean, it sounds like you do definitely more than myself, and like a lot of other people do probably, is having this appreciation kind of across the board for them, which is yeah, I think it's kind of rare, it's great.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think the last thing on that is like, the good thing about custom cards and also the bot is, if you are used to a style, but you want to sort of use your original sets. The great thing is like you can fill those 2000 through to 2005 years like with custom cards, right?
Right.
Because there's so many options nowadays. Like and everybody. I mean, there's at least like 7 or 8 people making cards, and obviously the bot helps as well. But it's easy to just like translate those, because it was unfortunate that they had to switch it up so drastically.
Yeah, I mean, we've all ranted about like, why not just make they could have made a 2000, they could have just made Bonds an on base
I know.
14 and just had him broke the game, and he's 1,000 points and no
Yeah,
one
why
drafts
not?
him. But I don't know if they felt like, who knows, right? And actually,
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was definitely something I wanted to get to, which the one of the things I admire probably the most about the bot, like the ease is of course just fantastic and create any card, but I think like from the get-go, you said like, I'm going to do each individual year in different styles. So if you do it, if you want to make, I'm trying to think, if I wanted to make Francisco Lindor from 2018 in 2000 style, I can. 2001
Mhm.
style, I can. 2002 style, I can. And again, like there's variation, massive variations in the formula there. So I guess like, did you know that you wanted to do that from the get? Because like, by all means, like you could have said, you know what, I'm doing 2003 first because that's what I know and I love the most. Just like our crew makes cards in the 2000, 2001 solidly and don't really go outside of that. So I think the fact that you just went across the board is pretty awesome. So like, how did you get there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it. Like, I've had a Photoshop template for years, honestly, that I've just sort of used. I haven't really shared out before this, but I would do, like, I would either make up some numbers myself before I made the sort of like Python script and algorithm. Um,
Mhm.
but I thought the one I started with, um, I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, was 2003, but that's just because it was the easiest to make in Photoshop, because there's
Mhm.
not like a lot of transparency and it's like
Yeah.
very blocky. Um, so I had that made, and I made a post like a few months before the bot on the Facebook group. I'm trying to remember exactly what I did, but I was like, hey, I think I nailed down the 2003 look. Like, here's some examples. But yeah, I started with that, but I realized like, and especially I have a bunch of information about, the most used sets on the bot, which I think are kind of interesting, but I knew people were really passionate about certain years, right? So I wanted to make something that, not just me selfishly being more of like a 2004, 2005 player
Mhm.
would enjoy, but I knew that there was obviously a huge part of the community that loved the 2000 and 2001 sets. So I didn't want to like sort of alienate anybody by just like restricting it to a certain set. Uh, I I didn't realize quite how much they'd be different from an like sort of algorithm standpoint at the
Mhm.
beginning, especially between years that are very seemingly similar, like
Right.
2000 and 2001. You think are very similar, but actually there's a lot of differences there.
Right.
And
Right.
then 2004, 2005 is the same. They look literally identical. Like, if you didn't see the set, like the year at the bottom, you couldn't tell certain cards apart. But again, there's like tweaks there that I really wanted to nail down. just to be as authentic as possible.
For sure. And it gives, I mean, each one of those sets to any given person has a personality. And I think you being like, basically you being able to go to the bot, put in a card that fits within the personality of what those cards are, regardless of if they're from that particular year, if they're from 2000 through 2005. So I guess like, one thing, kind of even taking a step back, like we're like how did you were you back, like when did you get back into Showdown, like have you been in Showdown, like I guess, and like when did the bot thing kind of click in your brain to say like, oh yeah, I'm doing this for sure?
Yeah, so I basically, like as a kid, like I was mentioning, I collected extremely actively from 2003 to 2005. And I distinctly remember especially being sad for there not being a 2006 set, because the Mets were actually becoming good for like, I guess they were good in the 2000
That's how,
and
right, that's
2001
always
sets.
that's how it works, right?
Exactly. So I was like, oh, there's going to be like a really good, David Wright card, really good Carlos Beltran card. Like I was pretty pumped. And then I went, to the, baseball card store I talked about earlier, and realized they were like, hey, they discontinued it. And then I sort of discovered that there were cards on eBay as well, which is a whole mess, how crazy it's become now. But I
Right,
remember
right.
like begging my mom for like, I mean, with $10 you can get some pretty good stuff back then. And I remember like exploring that. But yeah, I mean, as everybody sort of did, it died out a little bit as I grew a little bit older. I kept all my cards, and I would revisit them every so often. But I really got back into it, I would say like around probably like 2013-ish, 2014-ish. And that's when, so I was off, I went to college. I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but I started college in 2014. And which is probably not dating myself in the worst way, but
Also, I have to interrupt you and mention that we're both Boilermakers who went to Purdue. Like
oh
it's,
yeah.
a lot of synergy there. So just saying for everybody,
Mhm.
I'm not, I should probably be a better Purdue sports fan post college career, but hey, this is when it comes up and this is when it matters, right?
I mean, it's not the best time to be a Purdue sports fan after last week in the tournament. So we don't need to talk about anything Purdue sports during
Right.
this.
Well, really the whole Big Ten, but yeah, that's
Yes,
a totally valid.
exactly. So I went to Purdue in 2014, and my degree that I was getting was called Computer Information Technology, which doesn't mean anything to anybody, but you can think of it sort of as computer science, but very data focused. And I think honestly, what that stemmed from originally, like how I got into it, is Showdown cards and baseball stats in general. I think that was sort of the catalyst for like my, pursuit of data as like a career. So I started like, getting back into Showdown a little bit then, and I feel like I saw sites like your guys' site, and then there was a couple. There's a couple other sites. I'm forgetting the names of them. But I just remember thinking like, wow, people are still into this game. And I forget exactly when I joined the Facebook group. It was probably a little bit later on.
Mhm.
But realizing there's a community there. And then, so what I actually started pursuing as sort of a side project during college was actually making an iOS app for MLB Showdown. So I don't know if you've seen on YouTube, if you search up MLB Showdown iOS something, still a video app. I knew the app would never get released, copyrights and stuff like that.
Right.
But I fully made that app. I mean, it had, functioning multiplayer. It had, you can create your own roster. It was all like, it wasn't any of the original cards. It was all, stats from, back then. I think I started making that in 2015, maybe. So it was like, I know when like Yoenis Cespedes was really good. So that was probably like 2015.
Right.
So yeah, I started making that, and because, and that never materialized. I mean, that can't be released in that form of it. But I had to, for that game, for making the stats of those new cards, I actually had to make a sort of algorithm for figuring out the stats, right? So I sort of scoured the internet a little bit, like trying to figure out if anybody had done it before. I didn't find anything like, too conclusive. Everybody sort of had their own way and their own methodology. So then I decided to make like sort of the first version of just a script that basically used code to, produce the stats. So you input it with an Excel sheet of, the player stats, or you manually input their stats, and then it just dumps out that player's stats. And you'll probably see some or hear some New York City background noises. Hopefully it doesn't pick up too much.
No, in the Zoom world, it's completely dogs barking, ambulances, like it's part of the deal, right?
Fantastic. Yeah. So I basically had a semblance of a script, but it was very sort of manual, and the output would just be like a Excel dump, right? So you just like you have to manually put things in through Excel, and then it comes out in a CSV or Excel file. And then that sort of just like stagnated a little bit as I started my professional career after I graduated in 2018. And then after that, my buddies, so I was into Showdown like that whole time. And I remember showing them like the app, and that's when they were like sort of getting nostalgic about it. Cause we would test the app, we would play each other on the app. And they just like, yeah, they just sort of refound their passion for it. So then I also started like during that same period, like 2016 through 2018 about, I started also trying to complete my sets. So I remember I bought, when it was still reasonably priced, like a 2001 starter set.
That's great timing, honestly.
It was. Oh, I'm so thankful, man. Like it is right now, it would be not pretty to try and complete a set. So I feel anybody trying to do that right now, it's not the most fun thing.
Right. No, it's good that like people got into the game and people wanted to complete it. It wasn't great how much everything got, and who knows if it'll ever come down or normalize. Like it kind of has, but yeah, I'm with you that we lucked out, that being into the game pre-pandemic and like working
Seriously.
on sets, like, oh my gosh, like we didn't, we weren't totally breaking the bank at least.
Yeah. And like I said, I didn't have much of the like first editions or like 2001 cards. So luckily, like in that first booster box, like that 36 pack booster box, I think it's 36, right? Yeah. I pulled like I pulled the Pedro 2001 5 control 17 out. So that was clutch.
That's amazing.
I think I may have pulled the Bonds in the same one, that like 10 on base, 16 home run Bonds.
Right. How much do you remember how much, because it's amazing hearing you kind of like casually bring up like, oh, I broke open a 2000, booster box and ripped open the cards, which is like, again, like what we all love doing. Like, how do you even remember like ballpark what you would have spent on that?
It was max like $150,
which is because now it's 500-600, right? It's just wild.
It's crazy. Like I have some like right next to me right now. I have even some 2003 starter sets, which like the thing that makes them so valuable is there's a pack included that you can have the possibility to get that overpowered Barry Bonds in. So those, like I think I bought like 15 of them in a lot for max like $50, and now they're like $50 each or something. I don't know what they are right now, but they were early pandemic, like a crazy amount. So I feel lucky to have been able to open, first of all, that booster box. I think I got multiple booster boxes of other years. I think I may have gotten a 2000 set.
And the fact that you got a Pedro Bonds in all, because like the one thing that's amazing, kind of looking back at that, and I don't want to get too caught up in opening booster boxes because I'm hundreds of thousands of people talk. No, it's great, but like, the one thing that's so interesting to me now, just like of this boom, is that like the boxes cost more than I think what the full set would actually end up being, which is completely normal. And that's kind of normal in sealed world, right? In sealed boxes, but back in, you bought that $150, like not really, and like the Bonds card and the Pedro card over time they've definitely appreciated. So anyway.
Yeah, I remember thinking like, wow, I overpaid for this, but whatever. But now thinking about it, I'm like, okay, maybe not. So yeah, I mean, I lucked out with a bunch of that, and I used the Facebook group, used other stuff, like eBay, you know, how everybody does. And I completed my set probably right when I got out of college. And I've collected a few promos here and there, but now I have the complete, just like base and, you know, trading deadline and pennant run sets, as well as I think all the strategy cards, and then all of the promos that are not duplicates of base set cards, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like
Yeah, I get you.
that aren't the same stats. Like they're new players, which I think is only 2003 on, where there's like
Mhm.
new player promos. So my buddies and we started thinking about playing again. So that's sort of when I started ramping up a little bit more on like making cool things to help our experience.
Mhm.
So I started making this Excel sheet that basically lets you draft super easy. So how it happens is you basically have like this picture, like you know, a baseball diamond with some empty squares, right? And I have the complete checklist on one Excel tab. And then if you put like the player's name or ID in there, it will do all of the like point calculations for you. And it will basically like tell you how much you have for surplus. You can say, if I want a 5,000 point team, I draft this guy. Like it'll just do all those calculations. It'll
Mhm.
give estimated averages, OPS, home run totals, all that sort of stuff. Because my buddies, like I mentioned earlier, like we used to play without a point cap. So getting them adjusted to playing with, you know, a set number of points was not going to be the easiest thing. And it was a little bit tough to convince them at first, because they're like, nah, I want to play exactly how I did 10 years ago.
Right.
Um,
It's like, well, that's not how teams work,
yeah, no.
like,
And now we could never go back. I mean, that's like easily the most fun part. So we spend like once a month now, or back then, I mean, we started doing it's more like once every 2 months, but we sit down on a Saturday and basically have like a 12-hour long tournament. So we have a 2-hour draft, and basically we just use my set, and you draft a 20-man roster, and we've bounced between different things of like, oh, there's the salary cap, but there we also implemented like a luxury tax. So you can, if you go over the 5,000 point total, it costs more every, like, you know, increment of points you go over that total, right? So, and we also would bet money on it as well. So your buy-in would also go up. So you can try and be the Yankees or the Dodgers and go over the luxury tax, but you're going to be paying, if it's a $20 buy-in and you're at like 5,500, you're going to be paying like $40 for your buy-in, but you're
holy
going to have a
smokes.
better team. So that that got manipulated a little bit, so we had to step it back. People just ended up saying, screw it, I'm putting $50 in, and they would dominate.
Right.
um so we had to scale that back, but that
Feels like
idea of
real
like,
baseball, right?
exactly.
Except when they don't win and then you're just throwing away money. But my gosh.
Exactly. So yeah, we would play tournaments every like couple months, and they're familiar with the, you know, old or newer sets. Like we play 2003. We'd like switch years every time, but we still haven't played, because I they always say they'll play, but we haven't yet played, and it's just so sad that we haven't done it. But we haven't played a 2000 or 2001 tournament yet, which is just, I think, nuts to me. But pretty soon we'll do it. They're just very set in their you know, new school ways.
No, I
Um,
mean, again, I get it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I would, if you came to me and said, "Hey Jeff, we're going to do a, you know, a 2003 MLB Showdown draft," and be like, what you talking about? Like, what are you
yeah.
talking
What
about?
is
Like,
that?
absolutely not, you know. And if I guess like, and it's funny over time, like now, and a couple other people I know in our Discord have mentioned it, like we're now starting to open up to the concept of like, we sound like just traditionalist baseball people, but we're talking like show. It's just wild. Like I'm starting to open up to like using strategy cards and things like that, and
Uh-huh.
like because all of our strategies are without all of our games are without strategy cards, but we add other things
Hmm.
in to replace them. But yeah, no, and that's like that's kind of what this game. And it's also part, man, it just bums me out like that the game wasn't consistent across the 5 years. Like I get
I
get
know.
why they did it, but man, it just I picture a world where, we could throw a 2005 pool holes with a, 2000 Pudge and just go at it or something.
See, that's what's possible with all this new custom card stuff, man.
There it is.
So
Exactly. No, exactly.
that's how you do it. That's the greatness of it. But yeah, like we've played tournaments, and then the reason why I started like pursuing the bot, and I'm finally there. I know that was a long intro for all that.
No, that's great. That's awesome. That's great stuff.
But basically, like they would always ask, like, and I had that script I was talking about, which like did very, bare bones processing, and it was only for the later years of Showdown. But people, they'd ask like, oh my gosh, what would a 1927 Babe Ruth look like in this game? Because I would always think, like, in that 2006 set I was talking about earlier, like what cool legends or super seasons or other throwback cards would they have, right?
Mhm.
So they were always asking me, oh, here's a loud noise, somebody on a motorcycle in New York City going crazy. So we would basically like I would calculate that for them, and they'd be like, wow, this is so cool. Like we would spend like an hour. I'd hook up my computer to the TV, and they just like shoot off names, and I'd just make the cards with the script and output the stats, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, like, what would Pedro Martinez 2000 season look like in the newer sets of cards in like 2005?
Right.
What would Mickey Mantle card look like? What would a Willie Mays card look like? Just trying to like fill the gaps that they had in the original sets, which I think everybody loves doing, and I've seen through the bot for sure. Definitely tailored to those like ridiculous seasons. But so it sort of clicked for me. Like, first of all, I really want to improve this script. So, and I wanted to learn a little bit, like how I learned, honestly, most of my programming skills I use in my real job is, I feel like, through Showdown development over the years. So I feel like it's sort of like my side projects, but they've actually helped me as in terms of like a career, which is a weird thing, but
no, it's incredible.
it's a good thing. Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky to be sort of in the field I'm in, but yeah, so I decided, like, all right, I'm going to improve this thing. And I remember, like, basically I would, have this script I was talking about, and I made subtle improvements over time, right? So one of the things was, how do I stop having to manually input the stats? And so I have some web scraping experience with developing. So that's basically just like pinging a website and grabbing data and using it. So I implemented the whole, like, you can just input a name and it knows sort of what player you're talking about. Because I feel like that was one of the biggest sort of like barriers. Like, nobody wants to have to input the stats or input a player identifier, like find the baseball reference player page and plug it in. It's just like,
right.
It's from a user experience perspective, it's not going to click, right? It still would have been cool. Like, I'm sure people still would have used it, but
no, right. People do it, but I'm right with you that, like, you gotta be into that world, and you gotta be into baseball reference and sites like that
exactly
to really want to do that. No, it's like a barrier for sure.
exactly. And I wanted to make it like as simple as possible. So the bot, I don't know if you've read how that actually works, but basically it will, the name you input in that box, it will search Google for like a specific keyword. It'll say, like, if you put in Barry Bonds, it'll search for Barry Bonds, and you put a year, you put Barry Bonds 2001, it'll search Google for Barry Bonds 2001 baseball reference, and then it'll grab that player from the first link it sees. So I'm basically letting Google do all the guessing work, which has, especially early on in the bot, there were a few errors where if there are players with the same name, like Will Smith, it would just pick a Will Smith. So now you can put the baseball reference identifier in as the name, and it'll properly pick whoever you want, or you can like put Will Smith, hitter or something in there.
Yeah, I gotta ask you, when you saw the Will Smith, the actor, from, get jiggy with it, screenshots on baseball, like on your cards. How did that make you feel?
Oh, I
Was that
love
just
it.
the best? It's best, right?
Oh, I love those cards. People have done like Captain Crunch or something. Like there's been some weird, and there's like my buddy who's not into baseball, but is like a data scientist. So he like programs. I
Mhm.
had him test the bot and he knows nothing about baseball. He knows a little bit about like when we grew up as kids, like the players then, like Bonds, Sosa, McGuire, all of those guys. But he just would come up with the most random pictures and like throw them in there. I was like, oh, I didn't even think about this, which I
It's
love. I love when people
right,
do that.
right. It's great. So anyway, I just had to that Will Smith card. I remember there was a solid week where like people were finding like anomaly cards with like
Yep.
names that fit other people and then just making
Yep.
cards based on, getting jiggy with it, Will Smith. So
I know. And which yeah, I was like, wow, this is nuts that people are getting this detailed, which I love though. It helped me. It helped
yeah,
me improve it.
that was the call putting you over that 20,000. So you're like, this is how
I
you wanted to
know.
spend that, that extra, this is how we're going premium because of this.
Dude, you have no idea what kind of weird names. We can get to weird names that people put in the bot. Some of them just make no sense. I don't get what some people are doing and trying to make with this bot. But it does work for nicknames. I will say, like some of them, like if you probably put, see, I'm gonna say it works and then it's not gonna work if somebody tries it. But if you do like, I don't know, if you try like the kid or something and maybe try it for Ken Griffey, it may work. See, I don't know. People have to try it. People listening to this, you can go out and try different nicknames and see if it works.
Right.
But yeah, basically like, and I sort of lost my train of thought. I forget what I was talking about. But where was I? Oh, we were talking about sort of like the base, the inputting the name into
Hmm.
the thing. So I nailed down that thing. And then I started working on the stats, like tweaking things so they fit decently well. And then I sort of got to where I released that first beta version in November, like stats wise. I was like, okay, the stats are great. And this thing is really cool. And I thought about actually releasing it just as sort of a Python package. So people could, if they, wanted to run it from their machine, if they knew programming, they could run it and it's
Hmm.
totally still open source and available. But I realized like that's just, I mean, that's not good enough. So I started thinking about it, especially so I nailed down sort of the first version of the stats, which weren't perfect, but like at least were a decent estimation. And I was like making cards, but I would have to go into Photoshop into these templates I made and I would have to go in tediously and like switch every number. And sometimes I'd make mistakes and it would just be really annoying to have to do all of that, like editing. And those Photoshop files would end up being massive.
Hmm.
So it just wasn't ideal. And then I realized that actually, like, because I was thinking about, oh, can I automate this in Photoshop? Like, can Photoshop do the editing for me? And there wasn't any really good solutions there. But what I ended up doing was there's this library in the Python programming language that lets you basically manipulate images. So I realized I can actually construct these card images programmatically the same way I'm crunching the stats. So then I got to work on that and got to a decent version and then showed my buddies and they were just like, I mean, they were all over it. So then I started to like make the website part of it so that people can easily do it. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to release this thing. So then, I mean, November hit and I sort of released like I called it version 1, but it was really sort of a beta of it. And thank God it worked. But yeah, people seem to love it. So it was successful at the beginning, and I got some good feedback over the first few months. That's for sure.
Right. And I mean, and I sense, I mean, we got in touch because of that. Like, I know I
Hmm.
sent you some things and I
Hmm.
think like, one thing I know I mentioned this earlier, like the people are very protective of their formulas. And like one
Yes.
thing I see a lot of, and I don't personally love this, is that there's definitely like
Hmm.
formula elitism.
Oh yeah.
If you, so, okay. I love that you're acknowledged, like that's and I'm sure you've heard it. And like,
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you've gotten that. And it's like, bless you, man, for probably letting some of that go by the wayside, being like, knowing
Hmm.
kind of some of those people, but like, and that's fine. Like, I feel I feel strongly that, people can believe in the work they've done and the work they've put together to make what is quote unquote perfect. But at the end of the day, we're all still here for a baseball card game with stats printed on and that we're rolling dice on, right? I hit this all the time. And like, I think like the angle I saw that I could throw in, like you said, Babe Ruth, 1927, I have a card, I could print it out, put it in a sleeve and play with it. I think that's most people probably, I shouldn't say most, a lot of people don't care how many points it ends up being because they're just going to throw it on the table and put a team together and go, right? Like when you build the 1995 Indians, that like, I don't care what their points are. Maybe it's interesting in some way to kind of compare against the others because at least your formula is consistent. But anyway, that's always something. When I first saw it, that was like the thing that clicked for me is like you can just play with these, like you can just like, you don't have to care about the points, just play with these cards that are now made and created in a second.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more on the whole elitism part. I think 95% of people were ultra positive and super nice when providing feedback. Like I got so much valuable insight and people were super gracious, like yourself, Peter. Like there are tons of other people on the Facebook group and on Twitter and on Discord, everywhere. But I mean, they're all, there's always that subset of people that, are either a little bit passive aggressive about it, or just straight up blunt, like, I don't like this, which is yeah, it's hard to deal with at times, but you just think about it and you're like, you know what, like I feel like you just got to think about that 95%. That's anything with the internet, right? If you make something on the internet, if it's a movie or a, Showdown Bot app, you'll get some haters. So you just think about, the hundreds of thousands of people or 100,000 of cards, not people, that have like used, your system. So it's, yeah.
And I talked about this the other on a different podcast, which actually isn't out yet, but I talked to it's going to sound like a dramatic statement, but I talked about how, art is never finished, right? It's constantly, there's always more and it's always being tinkered in a way. And that's kind of like what card creation is, right? Like, I don't think anybody, yourself included, everybody who's ever created a single card would be like, it's done. It's done. Even the elitists could never tell you it's done because there's no concept of it being done. And that's why, like, there's some like completionist angle that like kind of like gets me stressed and anxious because it's like, I just want some fun cards to play with. And, like, I know, again, I'm not the card creator guy. Like I mostly just kind of help out with things more in the pod and kind of examining. I just, just throw their cards under the bus, but no, but like we have like, there's a set that the boys did, like Peter and them did that, back in 2018. It's one of my favorite sets. The formulas in it are definitely not perfect and some of the cards are jacked up, but like, so same thing with 2000, like these cards were printed, they said the set was done, they released it and you just had to roll with it. And I think like, a little different than releasing a set, like and I guess this was kind of going into my next thing I want to ask about, like, you're tinkering, like you've been constantly tinkering. I've been seeing you've done multiple updates since that November time, like especially one of them being more than 20,000 calls. But I guess like, what do you, I guess you could say talk through some of the updates you've done or just kind of how you see it kind of continuing.
Yeah, I mean, for the updates I've done, at the beginning, the cards weren't the best quality in terms of like resolution, just because I didn't even think about people wanting to print them out and play with them, even though that looking back, like, I mean, that should be obvious. But it was like 1/3 of the resolution back then. So that was sort of number one feedback after the first round. So I went back and like, updated all the image assets to be like high quality. So now they're like, the cards get printed at like 1500 by 2100, which is good enough to print.
For sure.
And so there's that part. There's also the stats part, which obviously needed, updates throughout based on people's feedback. Again, like I didn't play that much with the 2000 and 2001 sets. So I can sort of compare, and I have a script within the bot that sort of checks accuracy. So it'll actually read in all of the stats from the original cards and try and see if the bot would do the same thing that Wizards did, which I think sometimes sort of comes back to haunt me, especially in later years, like the 2002 through 2005 sets. But yeah, like I think those sort of updates, adding in like little features, you know, like being able to put, like sometimes that Google search thing didn't work. So being able to put in the player's identifier if they really needed to, like if the bot wasn't catching on to which player they want. Adding things like team logos in my most recent update and totally redoing a lot of the stats. So I like took basically in that first round, I was using that sort of old script that I'd used and it was like pretty good. It was okay. But I really wanted to increase the accuracy. So I went back and spent, you know, a few days trying to like compare to Wizards what I have. And I think it really paid dividends in the 2000 and 2001 sets, especially with things like strikeouts and points, just because those are much improved now in the 2.0 version. But it also made me realize even more how weird some of the cards were in the later sets. I mean, you wouldn't know too much about this because you didn't use them, but there's like a few examples that just don't statistically make sense and don't make sense from a point value perspective. So if you think about trying to match something that's inherently flawed, it's a really hard thing to balance. So you almost have to create those flaws back in your system. So like I was trying to sort of match what Wizards was trying to do. And there were cards like there's a 2004 Roger Clemens that's a 5 control, 17 out on the Yankees. And he did not have a very good year in 2003. So he should not even be close to that number. So it's weird. Like
it could have almost been marketing. Like we've seen that so often with, and like
100%.
we've also seen that. I don't know as much in the later sets, and it sounds like this was consistent. Like I don't know what they were doing in terms of QA and testing, if any, at all.
I have no idea. And some of the like promos that I was talking about in those later sets, the point values make no sense for them, and those are sort of exploited. There's a famous one like Carlos Feebles, I think is his name, or is it pronounced Feebles?
I was about to. It's so funny. Yeah, I think it's Feebles. I was about to bring that up because I posted. I think it was a 2001 or 2000 promo of Carlos Feebles. I
saw that.
And yeah, and then someone brought up and said like they ran in their formula, and I don't know how much was it. I guess like it's so funny how that just came up in the past few days here.
Yeah, he was 20 points, I think. People can correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was 20 points in the 2004 promotion set. And I don't know if I love him that much. He has a really high on base. He has a 12 on base. Well, not really high, but for those sets, like that's above average.
Right.
But then he had like 10 outs on his chart. So, but people loved it because he was also fast. He couldn't really play defense. He had like +1 at second. But like 20 points makes no sense. And those charts, there was also a Troy O'Leary, which is very similar. Like a high on base, really high outs, which makes like even running them through the bot. If you run like a Carlos Feebles 2003 for the 2004 set, I don't think it even comes up close to that thing. But like there were some weird, and even like you were saying, when they were trying to promote things, that was definitely the case because some of the Cooperstown cards later in that were wildly overpowered. And like there was it just makes no sense. I mean, I guess like if you think about it, they were trying to sort of save the game. So I feel that. But at the same time, it was just tough because when you make cards with the bot, they may not be as overpowered as that. Or you make custom cards, like it's harder to justify using their actual stats, having those sort of juiced cards that they eventually made.
Right. And like people like create this, basically they cement what Larry Doby's card should be in their brain. But then when they see it through your bot and they're like, why is he 100 points lower? It's like, well, no, he should have been 100 points lower. You know, that was always the correct version. And it's like, And actually, like, super side note, like, I never had many. I accidentally ended up getting some 0203 cards, and man, I just,
Mhm.
again, part of that wish that, and again, this is exactly what your bot does now, that like I can go and create those Cooperstown collection cards that existed
Yep.
in the later sets in my in the O1
Mhm.
formula that I love, right?
Yeah.
So
No, exactly. And I mean, like, that's I'm trying to nail down like a design for the backgrounds for Cooperstown cards. Then I've posted some cards with it, but I love those 2001. I mentioned this earlier, but I just love the design is like perfect for that
oh, it's,
era
yeah, it's
and
perfect.
perfect for trading card game. Like it is like so cool. I mean the colored backgrounds with the logo in the top, and it's a lot cleaner. Like I don't really like the look of the 2000 cards, honestly, just because I feel like that sidebar kind of
It takes up too much
clunkies it
room.
up a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
definitely clunky.
so I dude, those 2001. I mean, I wish they could just make every year with that sort of
Yeah.
theme. They were so cool. They were like, I wish I go back and watch that video like that Wizards put out of like Jeremy Giambi. Have you seen that video?
Oh yeah, if you funny enough, and for any, I'll plug the Discord. If anybody hasn't joined our Discord, I'll leave the link to join below. But if you actually open it up on your, I think it's just on your phone or on the desktop app,
Uh-huh.
there's a GIF that runs through, and it's actually the GIF of the first 20 seconds of that
Oh
video.
yes.
It's like
Yes. No, it's
fading in Randy Johnson, fading in Sammy Sosa, and you're right. I'm just like,
so
I'm just
cool.
sitting, I'm watching there, just like, doing rock hands, just being like, yes, yes,
I
you
know
know.
that video. I put that in that like iOS app concept video. I put that as like the intro, and people were like, "Oh, so much nostalgia." The and it was just those cards are just so sweet.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah.
funny that there's like I'm with you. If anybody's ever heard me talk about it, like, yeah, I also gush about the 2001 cards. I think the one thing
Mhm.
I regret that they didn't do more of was there's so many blue background and red background, and like
Yes.
the cards that are not that, like, I've beat a dead horse on this, that like the Pirates look great, the A's look great, like the Marlins look
Mhm.
great, like just because they're not red and blue. But man, they have like those 5 little wavy white lines in the back. I don't know what those are. I love them, and I think like
Oh, I love those.
I think
You
like you nailed it with it
yeah,
hit the
I
time, like,
yeah.
because like it felt 90s, but
hmm
not too 90s, right? And it
It was
was
a
like
little bit modern. It was a little bit clean. Like it
just a
was
little bit,
just a
right?
touch of clean. Like just enough where it's not like too futuristic. Like I I spent so much time trying to nail down those white lines. You have no idea how long it took for me because I like in order to create these templates, I would scan like an original version of the cards. I would upload that to Photoshop, and I would basically like piece by piece in Photoshop, like recreate that through like different elements in
That's
Photoshop.
amazing.
And
Yeah.
that was the one thing I wanted to nail. So those lines took me a while, but it's worth it because they're so sweet.
Well, and Peter brought this up. Him and I were talking the other day, and he brought this up when we were talking about you and I, doing
Mhm.
this, and kind of part of the just the full transparency angle that you're doing, which is
Mhm.
so amazing, incredible, and like very unusual in this world where people, again, the whole my formula, my cards, my template,
Yep.
my this, you made those templates, and correct me if I'm wrong, but those are just available
Yep.
for people to, yeah. And so like you can go take the O1 template that we all love, kind of make your own, just drop a player on top of it, and like to that point,
Yep.
like, and I'm sure you've seen this too, like there's a ton of websites out there that will just cut a player out of a picture.
Yep.
So like again, like what we talked about like 1 year ago, where it was this barrier, this kind of gatekeeping that was happening from card creation, I would say
Mhm.
a year later with the Showdown bot is essentially just vanished, is gone.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like I think, and talking about sort of that earlier point of future plans, like
Hmm.
I think one thing I've been toying around with, and I've got to work decently well. This is no guarantee that it'll come out anytime soon, but you were talking about like different programs to cut out the player, right? Um, so I've actually toyed around with the bot doing that for you and then sticking the background in, which because I've looked at basically I look at that list of cards that people have made. And unsurprisingly to me, it's a little bit surprising, but in terms of sets, 2005 is by far has the most cards on the bot. It's not even close. It's more than double. Yep. And then 2004 is in second, 2000 is in third, 2003 in fourth, 2001 in fifth, and last is 2002. And I think
that blows my mind, by the way.
But I mean, the reason why is I think just because it doesn't automatically do that whole background image stuff. It's way easier.
That's true.
And I've known this when I have to make cards for like the Twitter account. It's way easier to just quickly make a 2005 or 2003 card that like looks good, right? But
that's true.
It doesn't quite have the same hit using just like a uncut player from a 2000 or 2001 set. So I'm trying to basically have the bot use. I'm not a data scientist. I don't know that much about machine learning. So I'm definitely not a pro, but there are some systems that like can figure out where the player is in the image, and it'll automatically cut it out using that machine learning algorithm. So I'm working through some of that now. The problem is also cropping it the right way and putting it in that like sort of safe area to put a player in those 2000 and 2001 sets. But that's something I think is a big reason why I feel like the 2005 sets have really dominated the bot.
That's really interesting. And I know that people in general don't love the 2002 cards just from what I've seen. So I guess that doesn't surprise me. That seems to be the most hated set. But anyway, I guess 2000 being above 2001 for just
surprised me too.
That's surprising. And like I think almost every single card I've created on the bot has truthfully been in the 2001. So apparently I need to just submit more and just skew those numbers. And
well, also I think about another reason is it's the default, so that might be another reason.
Oh, that's
true. Defaultly picks 2000, but
that's
yeah,
I'm with you. And kind of like we talked about before, like I think the 2000 cards are probably the most recognizable. And it's kind of like you said, like when that baseball, the video guy, like the YouTube guy caught it and he tweets about it, and I've seen other big tweets too. And there was an Athletic article, you see all the people in the comments being like, I remember this game. Here's the card that I play with. And like, more than often than not, it's actually 2000. It seems like most of the time, because again, it was first coming out. They put so much money into it, too much money into it, overprinted, and everybody and their brother had these cards, right? So it's but that's really, and I think like I know our crew was toyed with just doing backgrounds of just like the picture just to make it easier, like, and that was, now that we've kind of gotten to a point, especially with your bot, like we don't really have to do that as much anymore. And actually I still think the 2001 format with the full picture looks great. I'm okay with that.
It involves a little cropping, but yeah, I agree. It eventually works.
Exactly. Well, I'd love to, this has been just fantastic. And honestly, picking your brain on all this. And like I said, like whatever new update you end up doing, whatever ends up coming, I know it's just going to continue to blow people's minds. And, I think everybody, talks about the community and how strong it is. It seems to be a small kind of niche thing in a way, but man, it's a part of a lot of people's lives in a lot of ways. And I know that the bot is a big time, part of that. So I would love to end and just kind of almost, I have some like even just rapid fire type of questions. I almost want to
bring it on.
Let's see, like you kind of already kind of took one. I was curious if it was what year got the most prints. So it's 2005 solidly. It sounds like I was going to say 2000, 2001 versus the other years, and it's not even in contention. You mentioned also, or go ahead. Sorry.
Or go ahead. No, I was going to have you guess who the top player and year, and I've probably already mentioned it on this.
I think
the
you
most
said
commonly one.
I think you mentioned Bonds 2001.
Yeah, that one is by far, and I think there's kind of it goes basically, there's Bonds has the most overall cards made on the bot. He has, I'm looking at the numbers right now. It's like 2,000 cards made on the bot, which is just nuts. Gosh. And then Mike Trout second, Griffey third, Babe Ruth fourth, Randy Johnson, Pedro, A-Rod, Ichiro, Mantle. So, I mean, pretty expected.
What's the, like, in that list, like, which could be, what is like the first name you look at and say, like, that's weird? Like,
I mean, he was good, but this one's weird, definitely. And I think there's a specific reason for it, but Robin Ventura is in the top 15.
oh,
And I think it's just because of defense. Like people
right.
want to see if the bot has really good defense. So that's a really weird one. There's also like somebody, this has got to be one person, but made a bunch of Mark Wallers. You know Mark Wallers?
I do.
So I don't know how many Mark Wallers have been made, but there has been a ridiculous amount of. I don't know if he's like, I don't know how he has time, but he's got to be in the top 20 of cards made,
Would
which
this
just
be
doesn't make any sense.
would this be a weird time to tell you that I love Mark Wallers and those were all me? You know,
Love
it's
that.
it's not okay. I already have weird fascinations with certain players, aka Doug Brocale, who I've also put into the
Oh
bot
yeah,
multiple times, but I haven't
love
done it
that.
a staggering amount, so I'm not enough to show up on that list probably.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I was talking about earlier, there's just some like I'm scrolling down this list of and I'll probably share out this like this I basically have this like dashboard of info on the bot. I'll probably share that out at some point.
Mhm.
But
That's
there's
great.
just like somebody putting Cleopatra into the bot. Like it just doesn't make any sense. There's just like some weird. There's Chipper Ice Cream Jones. Somebody put that in.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
which is just and so yeah, I'm always shocked when I look at this list and see what people make.
No, it's, I mean, it's, again, it's people tapping into I guess their fandom in all sorts of bizarre and odd ways, which I'm just so for. But has there been, like, I guess, like, taking out, like, this probably gets overpowered by 2000 or maybe the more recent or the 2000 decade, but is there like
Mhm.
is there any decade that kind of like shoots out to you that has been like, it sounds like maybe the 20s, like, you know, like 70s, I don't know, like, is there any decades you've seen just kind of made more than usual, they're more than you expected?
Yeah, luckily I have that exact chart right in front of me. So
Oh,
I
wow.
lucked out because I made this. So the most popular decade, I don't know, I'll give you a guess. What do you think the most popular decade is?
I think it's probably still 2000 to 2009.
It's close, but it's actually the decade of 2020.
Oh, it's, wait, like, we're talking,
So it's 2020, like, yeah, the year 2020. So like last year, because that's
so
technically a new decade,
right, so
right?
the single year is
Exactly.
oh my gosh.
So there's
That's
40,000 that have been in 2020, and that's the highest decade. Uh, and then in second, like you said, barely behind it. So they're pretty close. So it's 40,000 for 2020, 35,000 for 2000 through 2009. And then 2010 to 2020 is in third. And then it actually pretty much follows exactly in just like year order descending. So it goes 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. And then where it flips 1940 is under 1920 and 1930.
got
Um,
it. Okay.
unsure why, probably because just Babe Ruth and all those like sluggers from the 20s.
Oh, for sure.
Uh, and then there's some 1910, 1900, and 1890. And the caveat there, and some people don't get this with the bot, the bot cannot do pitcher stats before 1916. There's not enough data on baseball reference. So
Mhm.
you can make hitters, but you can't make pitchers.
That's interesting. I think I've actually
So
run
yeah.
into that because I just
Mhm.
I was trying some like really old, not even, you know, Cleveland Naps teams and the Cleveland Spiders and things like that, you know. So, and I
Yeah,
think that's what I
there's
ran
an update
into.
coming.
Oh boy.
I think I figured out a workaround. So because the one I'm doing this update all for my boy Old House Radborn. I need the bot to be able to make his card from like 1880 when he won 60 games.
Yep.
So
Oh
yeah,
man.
that's coming in the future.
And that, like, the 2020 thing is so mind-boggling because like the 2020 season was just so broken. But I guess
I
like
know.
that's people tapping into, like, you know, like they're
Yep.
my boys who made the 2020 set. It is a weird as
Mhm.
hell set. It's fun, but it's
Yeah,
weird as hell. And like I guess that's like people just need to know, like, what is Randy Rosarena like what is he like? I
I
got to see
know.
what he's like in this format, you know.
Yeah, and I have plans also to be able to combine years. So you could just put like in the year, you just put like 2019 plus 2020. There are some issues
Oh
with
man.
that, with like
Yeah.
defensive metrics and
Mhm.
awards. Like, how do I do that? But that's also coming in the future at some point.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it is kind of unfortunate that, a year that was, 1/3 of the games is number one for the bot. But I just wait till a week from now and opening day ends and people are using the bot, and like there's some super overpowered random guy, which is
Oh
bound to
yeah.
happen.
I mean, that's funny. We made Matt, who's on here in the pod. He made a Shane Bieber card based on his opening day pitch, which he was like complete game shutout. It was like bonkers. Which we were
Hilarious.
like, there's no way he'll actually be this good, and he actually ended up being that good. It was kind of wild, but I love, like, I've actually used this in other podcasts where I talk about how um we play leagues out and keep stats, and the stats are always wonky and make
Hmm.
no sense. And we had 2001 Mike Bordick was almost MVP of our league. He's like 270 points. It makes no sense. And we had a league of like mashers around. Like, it was like everybody was drafted pretty much. But we talked about how like the 2020 season in actuality is like a showdown season, like shortened,
Yeah.
like the stats just are so bizarre and don't make sense. And pitchers started 12 games, and I kind of love that it happened in not like, of course, I don't
Yeah.
love that it happened because of everything, but
Yeah.
like I love that it's just like it just happened. And like looking like 10 years back, and in decades from now, we're gonna be like, huh? Like what? Like that season, So I think that's kind of what people are probably a little bit tapping into with that 2020 part. But let me ask
Yeah.
you this, and I know we could talk. I
That's
mean,
okay. I got all the
we could
time. It's all right.
we could talk Showdown forever. So this is the thing. Actually, let me ask you this. Like, I know, have you, just at home, just for fun,
Mhm.
have you printed any of the cards from the bot? Like, just like actually you gone to the bot, made the card. I know you do for the Twitter, but have you printed any and played with
Mhm.
them?
Oh yeah. Last tournament, I mean, my buddies I was talking about earlier that commonly request card, they still hit me up. The bot exists, but my one friend insists on still texting me every day and say, "Hey, I want to see a Pedro card." I'm like,
And you're
"Dude, you
like,
can make it in a second when the
it,
same way I'm about to make it."
it's not
It,
VIP
it makes
treatment
no sense.
though. Right.
I
He
know.
wants you to make the card, a hand,
I know, and he wants the Cooperstown background. He wants all the fancy stuff, whatever. So I do it for him. I oblige. But
That's great.
yeah, I mean, I've printed, so I haven't printed any commons, and one of these years or months or however, I want to print like a complete set. But what I've done is I've figured out a method to make the foils look pretty spot on in terms of their older self. The only caveat is texture is weird on the front, so you got to keep it in a sleeve and you got to paste it to the back of a existing card.
Got it.
But I printed basically a little mini set for a last tournament with my friends that it was 20 Cooperstown Legends and 20 Super Seasons. And there were some random ones. I actually custom made a old Haas Radborn. I was talking about the bot can't handle him, but I just sort of made it up myself, and made like, cards that certain people wanted. So I've printed out probably like 40 of those foils. Um, but yeah, I eventually want to do more of that.
That's great. All right. So I know you mentioned Mets fan. Are you
Hmm.
still Mets fan, I assume?
Oh yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
All right.
yeah, this year you can never be too optimistic as a Mets fan. So, I'm walking on thin ice right now, even saying these words and having it recorded. But uh, I'm a little bit more optimistic than normal, but I know something's gonna go wrong. But maybe new ownership, new era, and they've made. I'm excited to see Lindor.
Yeah.
And we were going to
Enjoy
go
it.
to opening day, but our tickets, they like made new rules in New York City. So we
Mhm.
had bought tickets months ago, and they basically said, nah, those are no longer valid, so we're not
Oh
going
boy.
anymore, which
Yeah.
sucks. But yeah.
That's happening. And then the Rangers are somehow allowing 100% capacity. That's a whole different thing, but holy smokes.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
just still a wild time. We're almost done with this. Like, let's just, we're close.
I know.
So,
I know.
I guess let me ask you this, because I've been listening to some other baseball podcasts. Like, who do you think at this moment right now is the face of the Mets franchise?
Wow, that's a great question. I I think it's I want to say it's Jacob deGrom, but honestly, I think it's Pete Alonso. In terms of like from a public's perspective, I feel like it's like he sort of. I mean, he had a kind of a down year last year, but
Right.
I feel like he is sort of like who people think about. I feel like Jacob deGrom still, even though everybody acknowledges him for the most part as the best pitcher in baseball, but I still feel like he's not like the personality that's the face, you know?
No, and he's underappreciated for sure. And like just in
Yeah.
terms, I think because he doesn't have that larger than life personality.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. I think Alonso is the face, unless Lindor just starts playing out of his mind, which that would be great, right? But I
I
just
know
don't
well,
know
you
if
know
that's gonna.
more than me, right? You said you're an Indians fan, right?
I was gonna
So
say enjoy him. No,
I
it's
know.
I mean, it's none of it surprising. We knew he was leaving.
Yep.
I always like, um, I get too much on the on base percentage determining batting order. Like I do this in terms of showdown, and
Yes.
like my friends are like, dude, shut up. Like no one cares. I love Carlos Santana. He walks all the time. It makes no sense. But like
Yep.
I know I talked to my showdown buddies. I talked to just everybody saying like how the Indians need to like redo their lineup last year, and like how
Yep.
Lindor, even though he was batting first, should have been batting fifth. And I just
Yeah.
like, I guess I love Francisco. Um, and I wish we paid him and he stuck around, but there's also some part of me that's like, I just don't know. Like if he continues kind of his performance, how he's been doing like 2020, 2019, he wasn't super great in 2019 either. He was good. He was really good, but he wasn't like,
Mhm.
is it worth the money that he's inevitably going to get probably from the Mets? And I don't know. I don't know. And it's a huge question mark. I think it's a good investment, but and I do love him, and I
Yeah.
think all players should get paid a shit ton of money. I do believe in that. But as a fan, like I was thinking, thinking more about like I just know how Cleveland operates in terms of the team and the Dolans and the owners. So anyway, long-winded,
Yep.
but yeah, I mean,
No, I agree.
I think he's gonna get that extension from you guys.
I think so too. And I feel the same way about the on base percentage thing, and especially like comparing it to Showdown. Like I sort of have been so ingrained in Showdown, especially over the last 5 years. I sort of think of the stats in terms of Showdown, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh,
it's like it's weird because I mean some people are like on base snobs. Like I'm talking on base in Showdown context.
mhm.
Um, and I know like you know, I think about with the bot, like somebody once said, like, oh, this Ichiro from 2001 just isn't good, right? Because, I mean, he hit 350 that year, but his on base percentage was only like 380. And I feel the same way with somebody like Lindor, who's like in Showdown, he may not translate that
Right.
well because, you know, he could get +5 at short, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that crazy valuable in the game. Like you could just stick Omar Vizquel back there or something.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, I agree. I think they're going to extend them. I hope they are. It's going to be over 300 million. But
Yep.
I yeah, I agree with you too. That I think in terms of like I overweight on base percentage probably too. A little too Billy Bean esque, but you know.
Yeah. I like got in this mind where I like again um before I got back into Showdown, I was not the biggest baseball fan. Like,
Mhm.
admittedly, I was very into Cleveland when
Mhm.
they were doing super well in 2016 was a fun ass year,
Oh yeah.
honestly. But because of Showdown, I mean, 100%
Hmm.
because of Showdown, I started really thinking like, oh, okay, how did we get this card? And kind of thinking, just looking at baseball reference and all that. And like, then I started looking at like the 2020 Indians again, and especially in a shorter season, that was weird. I was looking at the stats being like, how would I do the batting order? And like, it's just like completely wrong, it's like not correct. But I was like, Cesar should be first, Carlos Santana should be second, which I'm not going to advocate that. But I knew that like there was like the whole concept of like, well, Lindor needs to get his groove in number one. It's like, what? No, like this is a numbers game. I just can't feed into that. But yeah, that's like my own snobbery,
Hmm.
weird, like it's not even correct, but all my friends tease me because I just freaking love Carlos Santana because the guy just gets on base. He does. He just
Yeah.
gets on base, and I've drafted on my teams, and like, and I think kind of like you said, and like, I think everybody has their own philosophy for like what matters in Showdown, especially with how you play. But
Hmm.
I've drafted teams where I'm just like, I'm just getting 10 and 9 on bases. Well, that's fine.
Yep.
Except every single guy just walks. And I've
Yep.
led the league in walks, and nobody scores, and there's no RBIs, and there's no runs. Like, you've got to, like, there's no question the balance. And I think, like, kind of going back to Lindor, like,
Hmm.
I think he can exist like kind of in that, 4 or 5 ish, especially on a Mets lineup that's a lot more stacked
Hmm.
than the Indians have ever been. But I think he can find that role, and if he can rake from there, that's the dream. And I feel like at that point for the Mets, that'll be worth every penny.
Yeah, it's tempting. They have like in the Mets lineup, they have basically their version of Carlos Santana, is Brandon Nemo. Like he is
Yep.
an on base machine. So
Yep.
like there's a bunch of different conceptual lineups. Like, do you stick if Nemo plays? If they don't like play somebody else in the outfield, do you stick him first and stick Lindor too? But then you think about like, all right, in modern lineups, your 2 is like pretty much your best hitter. But do you do like an old school? I feel like Tony La Russa is probably going to do this with the White Sox, but like stick like a Jeff McNeil second, like
Yep.
a classic 2 hitter, and then stick Lindor 3 or 4 and stick Conforto in there and Alonso, and they have Dom Smith, who's their most underrated player.
For sure. For sure.
And so, yeah. And I mean, the good thing is their hitting is deep. But yeah, that whole like lineup philosophy, that's what makes Showdown so cool. And in our tournaments, like if somebody's team is doing bad, like last tournament, I printed out from the Showdown bot, like a Mickey Mantle, Cooperstown card and somebody drafted him and they weren't doing well. So like, all right, screw it. I'm sticking Mantle in the 2 hole. And then, they started doing well after that in the tournament. So like, I love those sort of like lineup tweaks, even though they don't probably make that big of a difference, especially in Showdown.
Oh yeah.
It's just, that's like the most fun part. You draft your team and then you figure out, all right, what's my lineup? I love that part.
Right. And it's like, we've all done that in some form, and we think it like super matters. And like, there's a whole,
Yep.
the whole thing of tinkering. You never tinker, especially if it's working. And it's just like, but again, we're playing with cards with numbers on them and
Yeah.
rolling dice. Like, it's just like, I can't, like, I love our leagues, and especially when we keep stats, because it's like we're talking about real people. And I think that's like what the beauty of this game is, that these cards are more than just actual cards to us.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, let me end with this. I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, and I guess there's
Mm-hmm.
an easy answer for you as a Mets fan, but let's see.
Mm-hmm.
World Series champion 2021.
Oh, geez, you are putting me on the spot. I'm not going to say the Mets. I will never say the Mets. My gut. I mean, my gut tells me the Dodgers. Obviously,
Right.
I think they're the best team. But the problem is the NL is extremely top heavy. I feel like. I'll put the Mets in this. This is the most I'm going to gas up the Mets. But they're in that like upper echelon of like, I think top 8 or 7 teams in the MLB. I think like the Braves, the Dodgers, the Padres. The NL Central is a little weird, but like the NL East is stacked. Like the Mets could come in 4th, who knows? But I mean, I think the easy answer, and this is not a fun answer, but I mean the Dodgers. I'm never gonna pick the Yankees either.
Right.
Obviously, if I'm a Mets
Same.
fan, I'm not going to do that unless I'm trying to make them lose. Like saying,
Right.
"Oh, they'll win the World Series," like a little negative.
Who does your heart like? Other than the Mets, who does your heart want to win the World Series?
Oof. I mean, I really like watching the Padres.
Right.
And they haven't been good in so long. Like, and have they won a World Series? I'm trying to think if they've ever won. With Tony Gwynn, they didn't win, I don't think, unless I'm missing something.
Unless they won something farther beyond then, I don't think they've won anything definitely since the 2000s.
Yeah, they played the Yankees in the 90. I'm blanking on what year it was, but they played the Yankees in the late 90s, I know. But besides that, like they had some down years. So maybe the Padres, like that'd be cool.
The Padres are one of 6 teams to never have won a World Series. So there we go.
There you go. There it is.
Yeah, and I hope, like, I think I'm with you on both of those. I think that actually would have been my exact answer, truthfully. My only hope is that like the Padres can just give the Dodgers hell, like all the way,
I
like
think so.
to the end.
That's going to be so fun, especially
That-
because I feel like, especially with Machado being formerly on the Dodgers, like I feel like there was a little bit of beef last year. So that's,
oh,
I feel like
oh,
that's good for
definitely.
the sport. And
Mhm.
like, I feel like it's going to be fun to watch that. It's going to be like the Dodgers have 102 wins and the Padres hopefully have like 95.
Oh man, yeah, and I want them to be in the NL, the NLCS against. I
I mean,
just
I
want it.
don't, but yes, yeah, that would be fun to watch.
That's true. That's true. Maybe at least maybe the NLDS. I don't think that would actually. I don't know if they could, but maybe they could.
Well, it could
But
if
anyway,
the first seed and the wild card.
and the
I think it
wild
could
card,
happen.
which I think that's actually very possible. So,
Yeah.
um, well, anyway, Matt, this has been awesome. Of course, we were talking before, like, yeah, let's keep it to like 45 to an hour, and it's like we can just keep going. What are we talking about here? But I definitely want to plug this. Like, if you haven't used the Showdown bot before, just go try it. I mean, even if you're, big Showdown fan, never tried Showdown, which if you got here, like, bless you for listening to this. Go try it. It is a total freaking blast. And I've being able to like make I think an Eric Plunk card from the Indians in the 90s and send to my buddies. Like, this is amazing. So I'll throw the links in there. The link's easy. It's showdownbot.com, correct?
Yes.
So go do that. I'll throw it in the description. I'll also throw your the Twitter, which is a great follow. But yeah, man, appreciate the time. This has been so great. Really just beyond excited to see, just where the bot keeps going, right? It never ends. It's going to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. This has been, yeah, a blast. It's always fun to talk Showdown. And it never is gonna, I knew 45 minutes wasn't gonna be it.
What was I
So
thinking?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I mean, I love what you guys are doing. And I really appreciate all of your guys' support. You guys have been some of the nicest in the messages for sure. And Peter specifically has given me some great feedback. I was picking his brain on when I was doing the 2.0 update. Like, does this point total make sense? Does this make sense? So you guys have been, super great to me. So yeah, I appreciate the time. And yeah, this was a blast. We'll have to, find some time to chat again.
Dude, heck yeah. And we're all one community. I think that's like exactly what we all want here. And so, and man, I can't wait for, maybe either an East Coast trek, for one of those tournaments, or, bringing everybody to the, what we call the Showdown Mecca here in Northeast Ohio. I don't know, but I foresee that's going to be happening at some point, in the next couple of
Well,
years here.
the good
So
news is I'm probably moving to Chicago later this year, so it won't be as crazy of a trek.
I love it.
So
I
I'll
love
be a
it.
fellow Midwesterner again. I'll be back, in close to Boiler Country, I guess, like two and
Heck
a half
yeah.
hours away. So
No, you can go on the North Coast, or what is it? The North Shore track or South Shore.
yep.
And then,
Oh, that's a long
then
train ride. Oh yeah,
drive
man.
drive from Gary or whatever.
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, that
I
doesn't
just,
sound. Now you're making me not want to come. I mean,
yeah, no,
that's a brutal trek, but
my,
still, I feel that.
right. My wife was she went to Loyola, so, and I was at Purdue at the same time. So like I got very used to that. So heck yeah. Well, dude, again, thank you. Again, anybody who has questions, go to follow Matt on Twitter, ask him there, leave a
Yep.
comment, let me know what you think. And yeah, man, thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you, everybody.